Thank you. I'm here to talk about cybersecurity, and I know what many of you are thinking. Cybersecurity is all about major hacks, and actually in many cases, we read these big headlines that absolutely frighten us. And equally, we look at the growth of malware as slides to kind of give us an example of why this is an issue and why it should matter. But actually, I would argue that we as an industry, we as a society, have got this completely wrong. You see, cybersecurity is not a computer-related issue. Now, I was reminded of this a few years ago, and some of you may remember WannaCry. WannaCry was an attack, a ransomware attack, hitting predominantly hospitals, in particular in the United Kingdom, but actually all across the world. Now, I was actually in a hospital the day after WannaCry, and I actually physically saw the impact that it had, and you can see there, that's the comments that was given from a doctor in the National Health Service. But I actually saw the impact that a piece of ransomware can have in real life, because at the time we have a family member that's in a hospital, and I saw the impact that not being able to get patient care, not being able to get access to the internet had on him. And if you think about it, it's ridiculous, because we live in a world in which, in the case of the Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital, in which individuals were being turned away for emergency care because a nurse clicked on an email. And beyond the human cost, this impacts all of us, because there's a huge financial cost associated with this. This is actually a CSIS report on the economic impact of cybercrime. And as you can see in Germany, the impact of cybercrime is 1.6% of GDP. Now, to put that into perspective, that's your jobs. That's the jobs and economic future for you and for your children. This is the real cost of what we see. And personally, I was reminded of the impact of cybercrime just a few years back. As you can tell, I'm from England, and the United Kingdom are currently facing leaving the European Union. And I remember waking up the morning after Brexit, absolutely adamant that we were going to stay in Europe, and being surprised at the fact that we weren't. And for a few months, probably more than a few months, I began to question, did I truly misunderstand the underlying resentment of the UK population? Of course, we later read and we later learn about a nation state that was using social media as a vehicle and a tool to swing the vote in their favor, not in my favor, not in the favor of my children, not in the favor of the UK population, but in the favor of a foreign national entity. And just last week, there was a piece of research which came out that showed the same actor is going out to manipulate the European parliamentary elections. Cybersecurity is not an IT issue. It impacts the very fabric of our democracy. And we're seeing companies all across the world, and all of us begin to recognize that there is value in the information about us. And we're giving all of this information away to platforms, huge social media platforms that understand every component of who we are. And these devices that you have in your pocket that you call mobile phones are simply tracking and monitoring everything that you do. They understand so much about you. Now, I would argue that there are some social media companies who haven't really done right by the way that they look after you and me and the data that we have about us. And we saw this just recently with the #DeleteFacebook campaign. People were so angry at the way that Facebook harvested and sold on their data that it started a campaign, #DeleteFacebook. And what you saw was this particular campaign was more popular than the #TakeAKnee campaign. And so if anybody says to you, people don't care about privacy, I would completely refute that, because quite frankly, as you can see, there is concern. There is visceral anger out there about the way that we are being manipulated into the data that we have about us. But the reality is that all of us today are buying devices, putting them into our homes, and allowing large corporations access into the very fabric of what we do. You know, my daughter, she got the Google Home, and I remember her plugging it in. And I asked her a question, and I said, do you really want a microphone always on in your room and somebody listening and waiting for you to issue a command? And in some cases, we don't even know it's happening. This is actually taken from a smart meter. And smart meters today have the ability to learn and understand every single electrical device in your home. So therefore, your utility know the fact that you're coming in at 8 o'clock in the evening to cook your dinner. But just ask, what more could they do? Is it possible that you may be off sick and you're on your treadmill at 8 o'clock at night and your utility can contact the insurance provider and say, isn't he supposed to be sick? Why is he on the treadmill at this time? And what's even more remarkable is if we decrease the polling interval, they can even tell what TV shows you're watching. I've said in the past that utilities can potentially have more data than Facebook, and absolutely they can. So what do we do? Most of my talks are relatively depressing. But I want to stress that there is a new way of approaching the way that we look at the information, the devices that we purchase. And actually, I was reminded of this just recently with BoxLock. BoxLock are a company that we worked with, or actually we didn't work with. They effectively produce a smart connected padlock. And our researchers, what we found was we could unlock this padlock by bypassing all of the verification and security of this particular device. Now, that's a bad thing if you're producing a security device. So what we did was we contacted them and we said, look, dear BoxLock, did you know that there's a problem with this device? Did you know that it can be bypassed? And the company were fantastic. Within 7 days, they looked at the vulnerability, they produced a fix, they tested the fix, and they rolled it out. I would encourage all of you today, if you are looking to purchase any IoT equipment for your home, begin to question things like, does the company have a vulnerability disclosure policy? How quick do they patch? If you're using WhatsApp, for example, that's a very real question. In particular, if you're working in an environment where you're an activist, for example, you're a journalist, making sure that you have systems and devices, but not only that, companies that understand the value of security is imperative. And actually, maybe it's not even security. Maybe that's the wrong word. This is about digital trust. Can you trust the devices that you have in your home? Can you trust the applications that are in your device? And can you trust the company that's actually providing this? And are they doing right by you? Are they doing right by your family? And in some cases, there are companies that do that. And we have to begin to do this today. In many cases, we talk about cybersecurity and big countries doing hacking events and taking over devices, taking over systems, but there's a global industry out there. Citizen Lab did a tremendous piece of work in which they identified the customers of 2 companies that provide surveillance tools or malware for sale. And the countries aren't the big countries that we read about, but they're the likes of Mongolia or Turkmenistan or other smaller countries. And these individual countries are migrating from traditional to cyber offensive capabilities. This is more than life and death. And I'm reminded of this because we found a campaign being run by a threat actor called the Sun Team. And they were tracking potential defectors out of North Korea. And they were installing spyware on these devices to learn about every single thing that these individuals were doing, talking to, where they were, You can't tell me cybersecurity is about computers. That is life and death. And as we move towards this world in which everything becomes connected, the only privacy you had was your own home, and now that's gone. And what's worse is you're buying the devices and putting them into your home, allowing large corporations the visibility, introducing vulnerabilities into your life. So we've got to begin to address these issues today. You know, I'm absolutely adamant that if we potentially, as a market, as a society, began to demand better products, we will begin to see less of these issues. Because the world today frightens me. Even the Winter Olympic Games were targeted and compromised by a nation state. 337 organizations associated with the Winter Olympic Games were targeted via a persistent threat designed specifically to exfiltrate information associated with the games. And that's just one of 100 different stories that we can talk about. Whether it's the Winter Olympic Games, whether it's the electricity power grid, even whether it's my home computer or my home mobile phone, there are active campaigns being conducted all of the time with the sole purpose of targeting you and me. And what's worse, I think, for me, is they're being successful. CryptoLocker was a ransomware campaign which in itself netted criminals almost $1 billion. And that $1 billion was being used to research and development and innovate the nation-state adversary's capability to be able to target you and me. I've got a few minutes now to perhaps not only summarize, but perhaps just to emphasize why this matters. I started my career in IT on a help desk. And the reality is that everything we did was perceived as an IT-related issue. A computer virus would make your computer go slower. And yet in 2015 and 2016, a computer virus was designed specifically to disrupt the Ukrainian power grid. Not once, but twice. The net result of that, large parts of an entire nation went into darkness. Traffic lights stopped working. Every home was plunged into darkness. And yet, we still talk about this as an IT-related issue. The challenge that we face, I think, the fundamental biggest challenge that we face as a society is our absolute dependence on technology. There is no backup plan. And conversely, the biggest opportunity we have is our dependence on technology. If we don't begin to address these fundamental foundational pillars to integrate security and privacy, effectively trust at the root of all of these new devices, then I am absolutely concerned for the future, because within 12 to 18 months to 24 months, we're going to start to see automated self-driving cars on the street. They're going to be making decisions, and it's going to be your family that you're going to entrust in a computer system. My ask of all of you is this: we have to begin to integrate cybersecurity at the foundation of every single thing that we do. And that depends upon each of you. We will continue to see the rise of poorly developed products. We will continue to see vulnerabilities unless we, each of us, begin to demand more. Thank you.